Hey guys, this is National Master Kevin Yang back at it with another video. So, today we'll be talking about a game against Anthon2010. Always a feared competitor and always one to be reckoned with. So let's begin. D4, D5, Knight to F3. So, opening, not much. I'm just trying to, hit the central square. And after e6, I play bishop to f4. So this is starting to look like a London system. We sort of build the triangle, right? But at the same time, we get the bishop out, the knight out. After knight c6, I play c3. I play h3 to give the bishop some breathing room, right? Just in case if knight h5 comes on the board. And here c4 happens. And at this point, I sort of said, I don't think this is a move I know, because to be honest, I've always thought, after c4, if the knight goes here, the queen goes here, I play e4, one day we're going to have a great central looking push. I mean, b3 is also possible in this position. After b5, maybe something like a4. So I kind of feel like maybe if I played b3 here, it would be something for our friend Anthon2010 to really think about. So I played knight bd2 instead. I feel like I should have played b3, and after b5, I played queen to c2. Now, I could have still played b3, but after queen to c2, a5, I said b3. And I felt like at this point, our friend Anthon2010 could have played the move a4 and sort of course, shut down the queen side. So after a4, I would probably be thinking, maybe I'll play b4, and then I'll play a3, and then I'll shut down the entire queen side, because then I will start attacking on the king side. So that could be a thought, or I could take on c4 and play e4. So they're all on the table. But here bishop d6 was played, and I said I'll take, and I'll play a4. I will break this pawn chain. So after b4, I said no. So I'm going to take here, because obviously I want to get my free pawns. And after b takes c3, queen takes c3, d takes c4, here I played knight takes c4. So I think I should have played bishop takes c4 with the intention of going bishop to b5, but after knight takes c4, I sort of underestimated the threat of queen to b4. And at first, I remember thinking in my mind, I said, trade, trade, I love it. I'm up a pawn, first of all. I'm doing okay, and I'm not exactly down on development. But what I failed to realize is these knights actually generate a very tricky sort of, they provide very tricky squares and tricky alternatives. So white has to be a bit careful here. So for example, if I play rook c1, I have to think about something like knight to d5 or knight to e4. So these knights are very tricky, and I sort of failed to take note of that. But after castles, I was slightly happier, because I sort of noticed, my route to freedom was close. So bishop d3. But at this point, I also considered queen takes b4. And I was thinking knight takes b4, maybe bring the knight to e5, maybe bring the bishop to e2. I felt like my route was getting easier. But after bishop d3, I sort of said, I'm open to knight d5 again. After I take, you take, and I play something like king to d2 to protect my bishop. So that was something I was thinking about, but I was also thinking about, if knight does not come to d5, I'm going to play e4 one day. So after bishop to d7, I was pretty happy, because I feel like I had escaped this sort of pin with not too much difficulty, and so immediately I castled. Queen takes, rook to b8, rook to a1. So here I said, I'm going to protect my pawn. That way, if you play knight b4 and try to discover on the a4 pawn, I'm going to have my rook there. So after knight b4, I said bishop to f1. I wanted to tuck it out safe and just roll it away. It'll be used later on. Knight after d5 just brought my rook to c1. So at this point, I was very, very comfortable. And the reason is because these knights, now the squares are all protected by my pieces. And I think it's a very important part psychologically that the pieces are protected. Let me just get my webcam on. So you didn't see me before, you see me now. So rook here just really says, the squares are protected and I'm feeling very safe. Also knowing that this knight controls some key squares and it's looking all good. Bishop to c8, knight to d6, and all of a sudden I'm taking the initiative. I'm thinking, bring my knight to c4. I'm thinking maybe bring my bishop to b5. I'm thinking maybe e4. So all of these are on the table. But then bishop d7 happens again. And suddenly, you start to see, Anthon's moving the bishop back and forth, right? That means our friend Anthon truly has not found where to go or what to do, because knight to d6, you bring your bishop back to d7, then we sort of ask, what was the point to go to c8 anyways, right? Was it to go to a6? It could have been. But what I'm saying is instead of bishop to d7, follow through with the plan to go to bishop to a6. Even though it might look bad to you, it feels much better psychologically than, let's say, going back to a place you played the last move. Just playing bishop d7 basically admits that you probably have made little progress since you last moved your bishop, and it to the opponent gives a sign that you're sort of weakening. So bishop to a6 would have been better there. Knight to e5, come on in. Bishop to b5. Now I could have also played knight takes e8 and played something like e4 as well, but it's a matter of choice. So bishop to b5, and now f6. And here I said, wow, this is complicated. Do I take on e8 with the knight? Do I move back the knight? Do I move to d7? Right, so there are all these options, and I eventually said take, check, and take on e6. Now, I kind of felt like I could have approached this better because after d takes e5, I was sort of worrying about knight to d3. But at the same time, there's this move bishop takes e6 that I sort of failed to take into notice. So I could have thought about it better, but I don't know. Bishop takes e6, e takes d4, and here I said, if I take on d4 here, there might be rook to a6 skewering the two pieces. So I said, let's trade right away, and I'm up a pawn right now, but I'm not necessarily winning or anything, because Anthon has plenty of play to come and target this pawn. So it's up to me to maybe get another pawn or try to consolidate my advantage. So I played knight to b5, rook to c5, possibly targeting the a5 pawn, keep an eye on the d5 knight, and after knight to b6 I played this move knight to c7, saying I have this discovery on a5, but I also have this check and fork on e6. I also have a third option of playing d5 here to advance my pawn, but after king e7 I said rook to e1 and knight to e6. So I also could have taken on a5, but I sort of said, black has these pawns to take, and I said, I don't know if I want to deal with simplifying here just yet. So I wanted to complicate the position a little bit. I want to play knight to e6, protects d4, and threatens the rook. So I make the rook move, and all of a sudden, I can actually play rook f5 here, which I sort of missed, because after rook f5, king g6, I could play the move g4, and all of a sudden threaten knight f8 and rook h5 checkmate. But I failed to see that, because it was a simul, and I had probably not that much time left. So knight g5, king g6, and I decided to trade rooks, because I thought, you know what, my pawn on d4 is probably more valuable, or pushed farther than the pawn on a5. So after here, I played rook to c6, and here I made a misjudgment, because at first I thought, okay, I was definitely going to get a piece. Knight d5, knight f4, double check, right? But I missed the move rook to b4, and once I saw the move rook to b4, I said, yikes, right? My path to victory isn't so easy anymore. So it's just a lot of complications that I wasn't really sure the best approach to deal with, but at the same time I only had a very limited amount of time. So what I should have done here is, instead of playing rook to e6 or knight to g5, I should have played rook to f5. That would have made things much easier. But here our friend Anthon played knight d5 and blundered with the move knight to f4. Now there's no other check that really gets the knight. Knight to c7 with check leads to knight backing into f6. So knight f4 had to be the way to go. Knight takes, stop the pawn, advance my own pawn, and I advance my own pawn even further. And after rook to a8, I said, you take, I'm going to queen. So after g5, I queen, and went to go take the pawns, and I pre-move my way to victory. So checkmate, lawnmower, and checkmate. So what was there to learn here? Well, there was obviously a lot to see here. We saw in the opening that this c4b5 approach, although it may look good, right, you're claiming space on the queen side, it led to a dismantling of the queen side, right? I was able to get this pawn, and I should have captured with the bishop here, because capturing the queen, capturing with a knight, led to queen to b4 and this very scary looking pin, given that there's knight d5 and knight to e4. So I sort of do regret my choice, but at the same time, later on, I got the position that I wanted. I got my knights where I wanted. I could have played e4 at any instance, but I chose not to. But I did have those options, and I feel like if I took some more time to weigh those options, if I had more time, I could have played an even better game, but I was proud of my performance, right? I consolidated, and even though, after rook d1, I did not find rook f5 here, but I found good enough moves to at least give me a good chance at winning the game. Like, although I didn't exactly win based upon playing the smoothest game, I won based upon, taking advantage of my opponent's mistakes. I still feel like it was a well-played game, and to be honest, most games you will see an inaccuracy, 2 inaccuracies, 3 inaccuracies, whatever, but regardless, it's important to have fun. It's important to learn from those mistakes. It's important to keep that curiosity going. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.